This chart you're looking at is the secondary DPM of all the battleships that I've ever even attempted to use secondaries on. I didn't include everything in this list, but you're going to notice something very curious at the very top of this chart. And that's going to be that a tier 8 has the most secondary DPM at 491,000. Now, the hitting DPM isn't quite at the top, but still, third on the list behind Ohio and Schlieffen, and it's at tier 8? It's possible I was wrong about the Flandre. It's possible that I didn't fully understand how good this thing was as a secondary battleship. And of course, the changes that have been made to secondaries since this ship was released have certainly helped it. This ship released after the Commander rework, but before secondaries were given their somewhat return to old accuracy. So after 35 seconds, we now get old accuracy back. And given this ship's ability to pump out secondaries, that could be very good. You got to remember, of course, that this is only 100mm secondaries, so we don't pen all that much. However, I have taken IFHE, and that means these secondaries can pen superstructures, at least. So we do miss out on a little bit of fires, but I believe the damage that we get out of it more than makes up for that. And we still have a fairly respectable fire chance. I think it's somewhere in that 3.5% range, which is pretty decent considering how fast these things fire. And yeah, you're going to notice this build does not include extra heals. So the Flandre, if you didn't know, only gets 3 heals base instead of the normal 4 you'd have on a battleship. But you're a tier 8 with 75,000 HP. That is insane. You're basically getting the Alsace Bourgogne hull at, well, the lowest tier you could possibly get it at. And you're getting 9 guns instead of the 8 you get on something like the Richelieu or something like that. The guns aren't amazing. I'll show some pretty horrifying examples of that later in this match. But what I want to focus on is the incredible secondary power of this ship. I've been getting pretty excited about some of the new secondary battleships coming into the game. I'm sure those of you that like playing secondary brawly ships are quite excited to play the new German ones. I did actually manage to get my hands on the tier 7 by using almost all of my community points to get a few more German tokens that allowed me to get the tier 7, so you can expect a video on that probably tomorrow once I've played a couple more games in it and get a little bit of a better feel for it. But it's very fun, and I was just wanting to check what the DPMs were. That's what prompted this video. I wanted to check, where do these new German battleships stack up? And they're pretty good, honestly, especially when you tick the hitting DPM, which tries to calculate how often the secondaries will hit, you know, taking into account the accuracy. Because, of course, accuracy is one of the most important parts of a secondary battleship. And I was shocked to see the Flandre that high up. I did not expect that at all. This is actually a ship that I haven't played since I did that initial video on it when it came out. I thought it was going to be better than what it was. The main guns were just too inconsistent, and the secondaries at the time weren't all that impressive. Even though they had a fast fire rate, they just didn't get accurate enough. However, now you can see we're already up to, what, 123 secondary hit combo there, which is pretty insane given that these ships are pretty far away, and tier 7 battleships aren't all that big. If you find yourself fighting higher tier ships, you'll hit even more shells yet. And that's pretty hilarious to me that this tier 8 has some of the best secondaries in the game. They are a little bit difficult to get good use out of them given their pen and, well, some of the poor firing angles. But one of the very crazy things about the French battleships is just the weird space turtleback armor they have. I'm sure you've noticed this if you've ever shot at one, but they soak up so many shots as non-pens or over-pens. It's ridiculous. And I think that comes down to the outer 32mm plate, followed by the very thick and actually surprisingly tall armor belt. That's the main belt that's pretty thick. And then the turtleback, which can help you to deflect and not get citadeled. It's not a perfect turtleback. It's not as good as a lot of the German battleships are, but it's still there. And it makes these French battleships surprisingly tanky, even though They wouldn't seem like that if you just looked at the bare armor viewer that shows 32 millimeters of armor everywhere. But it allows you to do these things where you sit almost broadside, well, certainly broadside enough to get all your secondaries off, and you don't actually get punished that hard, at least at lower tiers. Of course, at higher tiers, there's some pretty hard-hitting battleships that really don't care about your belt armor. But assuming the belt armor shatters it, you can do that reasonably well against certain ships. Now, the main guns are a bit of an issue on this ship. Like all battleships, you're not guaranteed good accuracy at all. And against this mines, which says Cross of Thorn, which is just some Warhammer 40k integration. It's a mines, it's a ship with 25 mil armor basically everywhere. And it means that our 380s should just be able to kill this guy, but we're having some struggles. So don't expect your ship to be perfectly accurate and this ship to be that laser beam of a Republic, let's say the cruiser killer battleship, right? You're not going to be that at tier 8 at all, especially given the secondary power of this thing. You got to expect that you're not really going to be able to do much with these main guns. It can happen. We get a dev strike later on. That's pretty insane, but I think this is a great way to show how inconsistent these guns are. This is a tier 8 cruiser that we overmatch almost everywhere, and we just can't kill him. A full pen for 1900 damage, I don't know how that happened, but it leaves him on 33 HP, and which basically means that he's got maxed out Adrenaline Rush. And on a mines, if you've ever played that ship, you know how the DPM gets when you get low on HP, if you manage to survive. It's pretty nuts. So that's not good that we left that guy up, because our back turret there actually didn't kill him. Fortunately, the DD comes out and we get him killed. You notice we've lost a lot of HP. That came down to the aircraft carrier and that mines getting some huge damage in on us over the island. We just didn't get the kill on that mines, and we lost a lot of damage for it. We do get a good hit in on the Massachusetts, and surprisingly don't take much damage in return. That's got to be one of the most unfortunate salvos out of a Massachusetts I've seen in a long time. That poor guy. Although, to be fair, we were getting pretty unlucky earlier on, so that's just battleships for you. So we got a nice, good trade on this Massachusetts, and that actually helped us win this game, even though we do end up dying to his much more accurate second salvo. A really good game, but not the craziest one that I've had in this ship recently. I've only played actually 2 games. These games happened almost back-to-back. They're split up by one Brandenburg game that I'm not going to show you. Let's just say I was matched into a mostly tier 10 game with an FDR and a couple of submarines. So you can just imagine how well that one went. Let's look at this really, really good Flandre game instead. How about that? And our propulsion mod that I am running on this ship, helping us out-accelerate these torpedoes. And, well, these secondaries just murder DDs at close range. It's actually kind of crazy. Giving the IFHE on the 100mm secondaries allows them to pen destroyers and superstructures. I think it's a pretty good pickup. And this Prince Heinrich, a ship without turtleback, actually. That's something that's unique and not so great about the battlecruiser line, as we just dev strike them. Yeah, inconsistent guns. So if you hit, I mean, you're going to hit hard, because these French 380s are just that good. Probably the best 380mm guns in the game. Of course, you do want higher caliber stuff as you go higher in tier, but if you have to be stuck with 380mm guns, you probably want the French ones, let's be honest. So a lucky dev strike, but it can happen with this thing. And being in close quarters, having 9 guns instead of the usual 8 or so that would be on the Richelieu, it's pretty nice to have. And this extra HP really does go a long way with this ship. You only get 3 heals, at least with this build. You get 4 if you take the improved Superintendent, but I'm not taking it here. I view the extra amount of HP you get right off the bat, being 75k HP battleship at tier 8, that makes up for that extra heal a little bit. I'd rather take fire prevention, concealment, and secondary accuracy. That's the build for you. I'll go over it more later on. But it allows us to get much closer range and allows us to get these crazy secondaries going. You do really want to maximize the secondary time that you have on target. That's really going to help this DPM, that's raw, crazy DPM, actually hit a little bit more. You want to get that secondary buff going and keep it going as much as you can. Although, that said, it is good to run away some of the time when there's a CV, a submarine, a battleship, and a couple DDs after you. Oh, and a hybrid ship. It's maybe not the best to just hang around and take all that damage. But our fire does manage to burn out the Massachusetts. We still have a pretty respectable fire chance with IFHE, which is pretty nice to have. And a ship this quick can maneuver outside of some of these subtorps, which is nice. You'll see later on we get crushed by them later, but at least we managed to avoid those ones, primarily because he didn't have us pinged, I think. Although the ping probably wouldn't have mattered given how close they were, at 2.1 kilometer range buffer. Now, it's time to make our final stand. Our team has pretty much folded on this game, and it's unlikely we're going to win, but let's see if we can make a good shot of making it close. So the Issei is getting his torpedo bombers out, which is unfortunate, but we can turn into them. They're not going to do that much damage to us, and it does mean that the main guns are not being shot at us. The real issue here, though, is that submarine, and there's really not much I can do here, being essentially cross-dropped by homing torpedoes and hybrid airplanes. So not the most fun way to take a bunch of damage and nearly die, but that's the game these days, right? You can have fun with these ships in the game, but that is why I say oftentimes that the best matches you can get in World of Warships are the ones with the 3 core classes, right? Battleships, cruisers, destroyers. The other two really just do ruin that experience. They don't really bring much to the game other than sadness for everyone who's not playing that class. But back to this one, we are managing to take out the submarine. Miraculously, he was out of battery, so we do get him spotted and taken out relatively easily. Of course, if he had done a better job of managing that battery, there's nothing we could have done. And maybe with our main guns we can finish off this destroyer. Not quite, but we do decide to swap our secondary target. That's something you're going to see me constantly weighing in my head in a lot of these secondary games. Is it worth it to swap the secondary target and lose some of that accuracy? In this case, yes, it was. We managed to pick him up with our secondaries, and just look at that chat feed. I mean, that is a lot of awards. Unfortunately, in a losing effort. But it looks like I was wrong about this ship, or at least the secondary buffs that were received in 10.8 or 10.7 managed to make this ship a very fun secondary ship at tier 8. Assuming you get the right matchmaker, but we do get 1.9k base XP on a loss. And I apologize for the resolution of this score screen. For some reason, Shadow Play was recording at 720p instead of the usual 4K. So the build for this ship is pretty all in on the secondaries. I think you've seen this build before, but gun feeder allowing us to swap between the HE and the AP, definitely something you want on the French 380mm guns. IFHE giving us that extra boost to these 100mm guns, allowing us to pen 21mm, giving us that threshold for superstructures at higher tiers. That's the main one. Some destroyer hulls, that kind of thing as well. Low tier cruisers, that too. Adrenaline rush, extra secondary range, secondary accuracy, concealment, and fire prevention. I'm not actually taking emergency repair expert, even though you only get 3 heals with this thing. And that's just because you can think of this extra HP you get over other tier 8 battleships as almost like an extra heal that you've just already added to your ship permanently. So it doesn't actually mean that you're that much less tanky because you don't have the 4th heal. That extra base HP helps you a lot. Of course, fires do percentage damage, so you do want to avoid fires. That's why we're taking fire prevention. But that's why not having 4 heals isn't the biggest deal in the world. Obviously, it'd be preferable to have it, but I think concealment, fire prevention, and secondary accuracy, at least for this build, are the way to go. Here's the upgrades I have. Of course, these secondaries break very quickly, so having auxiliary armaments makes a lot of sense. I haven't really noticed my main guns actually getting disabled all that often. So that's the Flandre, the most DPM secondary ship in the game, and it's at tier 8. Of course, held back by the lack of pen and accuracy and range, but a pretty fun ship overall. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.